Tabletop role-playing games have been a hobby long enough that we've got this generation of older dungeon masters that have passed on their knowledge to a new generation of dungeon masters, and they in turn are passing on their knowledge to another generation of dungeon masters. We've all this stuff that we've encountered, and we've solved those problems at our table, and we've not solved those problems at our table, and passing on that knowledge is all a good thing. Right up until all the nuance around these conversations gets boiled down into these kind of sound bite nuggets, like don't split the party, always yes and your players, rulings not rules, always fail forward, and evil player characters are always a problem. Stripped of all the context and all the nuance, these things become things that people take as axioms, things that are true, that you must assume are true, so that you can continue the conversation from there. Except all these things did have nuance. They had a lot of context. They were not rules. They were guidelines.
The code is more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules.
Hi, I'm James, and I've been a Dungeon Master for over 25 years. On this channel, I talk about the things that I think about, plan, and plot for my tabletop role-playing games. If you like that kind of stuff, then there's buttons down there for like and subscribe. Today, I'm hoping to shed a little bit of nuance and history behind this little nugget of RPG wisdom. Shoot your monks. This phrase comes from, I know this is going to be a huge surprise, monks in Dungeons & Dragons. Since at least the 3rd edition of Dungeons & Dragons, monks have had some ability to deflect ranged attacks. Not just make themselves harder to hit, their armor class going up, but even a successful hit, you hit that armor class, could be deflected, causing 0 damage. That ability has morphed over time into allowing the monks to reduce any kind of physical damage, ranged or melee, piercing, slashing, or bludgeoning. It can all be reduced to 0. You might ask, what's the problem there? The character built this character to get to that point. Isn't that cool that they're functionally invulnerable? And yeah, it is kind of cool for a while. But if you get so many of these characters that each have these kind of different invulnerabilities, then it can become difficult to challenge the party. It wasn't just the monks. Rogues got damaged so high that they could one-shot monsters. Clerics and wizards were functionally immune to anything that would affect their mind. And if you have so many of these characters with all these kind of different invulnerabilities together, it can become difficult to challenge the party. And a game without any challenges, well, boring. If we assume that the players are putting the monk up front to function as a kind of tank, somebody that will kick in the door and take the brunt of the upfront damage, but they are immune to that damage, then yeah, after so many fights, it will become boring. But, examples help, so let's set up a hypothetical. Let's say that the party of Sir Hypothetical has been sent by the Queen to go find out what's been happening to guards found murdered on the road to the keep to the Borderlands. In the lead, they have Sister Asterix, the monk, followed by the wizard who fizzled. They're out scouting when they are ambushed by 4 goblins. Those goblins roll high on initiative, so they get to go first. Do they attack the monk or the wizard? You as a dungeon master are aware that the monk has deflect attacks. At least one attack sent at this 3rd level monk will functionally be rendered useless, so why do it? But do the goblins know that? Are you thinking tactically, or are you metagaming? Are you trying to deliver a tactical experience, or are you kind of ruining the player's fun? Often this is phrased as kind of game versus simulationism, which I find kind of silly because I play simulation games. I enjoy finding ways to manipulate the mechanics so that I can win at a game that is about simulating an empire. I want to win at Empire. I think it's more of a difference in tactical fantasy versus power fantasy. A power fantasy kind of player or mood would want to feel, powerful and vulnerable. I want to watch these arrows bounce off my monk and totally be able to protect the squishy wizard that's behind me. Versus a power fantasy kind of player or mood, feeling like their party is a well-oiled machine that has flexible enough tactics to respond to any situation and totally overpower these goblins. The power fantasy kind of player in the monk situation might say, oh, come on, the goblins can't possibly know he's a wizard. They're just goblins. We don't look that different, really. He's not wearing armor. I'm not wearing armor. It's just as likely that I have a quarterstaff as he has a quarterstaff. First, rude. Second, isn't it possible by that logic that the goblins mistook the wizard for a monk? And third, it's in the goblins' best interest to increase their odds. 4 versus 1 is better than 4 versus 2. And the goblins are successful enough to understand their odds in combat. You and your party may not think much of them, but lots of other adventurers, guards, and certainly random villagers die to goblins. If they weren't at least somewhat clever, then there would be no goblins.
Oh, come on, the goblins aren't that smart. They don't know tactics.
Again, rude. Goblins haven't had a low intelligence since like 2014, and even if you believe that goblins should not be as intelligent as human beings, neither is a coyote, and the coyote absolutely uses instinctual tactics. It knows the difference between a physically imposing and capable prey and one that is physically weak and ready to be pounced on. In this situation, the coyote would absolutely attack the wizard and drag them off to nom-nom them. But I'm not letting the tactical kind of person off the hook here either. These kind of characters that are basically just bandits are not special forces. They're not practicing perfect tactics. A coyote is spooked by a loud noise. If the wizard just lets off a bang, then the coyotes might run away, and so might the goblins. And they're certainly more likely to attack the monk once the monk punches them in the face. Most people are. If you punch someone in the face, they're far more likely to see you as a threat, even if the person 10 foot behind you has a gun. I think what's really happening here is we have two types of fun that are coming into conflict with one another. And I think a better argument that gets at that is, why do I have all these abilities if everything in the game is just going to dodge and circumvent them? The player has committed to a role: healer, tank, melee damage, or range damage, and they are now unable to fulfill that role because of the abilities that they took. And it's making it harder for everybody else. I took all these things to make me a better tank, and now I'm not the one taking the damage. It went somewhere else. I've made it harder for them, and that makes sense to me. I don't like that feeling as a player. But there is like a little bit of a hole in this logic. While the monk does have all these abilities and tanks have all these abilities to not take damage, so does the mage. Shield. If I can just cast this, I won't take this damage. Shouldn't the mage get to feel cool about having that ability, those spells, those ways to get out of trouble? And if I don't threaten them with the monster sometimes, when are they going to get to do that? If I did arrange fights where everything went according to plan, the monk or the tank, fighter, barbarian, whatever, took all the damage, all the attacks, and the mage is able to unload with impunity, then what does the healer do? What does the cleric, the druid, the bard do over there? Why did I take all these healing talents and these healing spells if I'm not going to get to use them? Sometimes as game masters, we have to attack the party where they're weak so that they do get these opportunities to use these other abilities to get themselves out of trouble, so that the fights, the game feels dynamic, so the game stays fun. The key word there is sometimes. I played when this advice was spawned, and yes, the monks had better ACs than a fighter, plus better saves, plus a bunch of other immunities, but they weren't alone. Rogues had damage that was ridiculously high and could one-shot many of the monsters. Clerics and wizards were basically immune to anything that was affecting their mind, and you could waste an entire round attacking one of these high defenses, only for nothing to happen. And then the players get another round to unload all their damage, and at the end of the fight, they basically went completely uncontested. And some of us wanted to reintroduce those challenges. And looking at these high defenses, we dodged. Goblins, manticores, giants, nothing ever again threw something at the monk. There were no wisdom will saves that ever went to the cleric or the wizard. And all of a sudden there were a bunch of constructs at high-level dungeons because the cleric couldn't turn those and the rogue couldn't backstab them. And the players would complain anyway. If you threw so much as one undead encounter in a dungeon with 5 humanoid encounters, all of a sudden the rogue would cry, I'm useless, I can't do anything here. Even though they just spent a half hour stealthing through the entire dungeon, murking every one of your cultists. Maybe it's okay if the cleric gets to shine during one fight? What Shoot Your Monks originally meant was don't explicitly avoid characters where they are strongest. Not only attack players where they're strongest. Everyone's a target. Everyone's going to get attacked by everything roughly equally. Everyone gets a chance to feel cool and use abilities to get out of those attacks. One of the coolest feelings in tabletop role-playing games when you're rolling dice is when there is a slim chance of success. Let's say that somebody does try to charm your fighter and you have to get at least a 17 or else you're going to get mind controlled and turn on your entire party. And you manage to squeak out that magical 20. That feels really good. But that didn't feel as good if you were attacking the wizard and they could succeed on anything above a 10. To get that feeling, sometimes the dungeon master is going to have to attack a character that is weak with an ability from an NPC that is strong. Let's go back to Sir Hypothetical in the woods with his party and those goblins. Those goblins see 2 adventurers out in the woods in robes, and they want to increase their odds of success. But there is no way that they know who these adventurers are. The life expectancy of a character in a traditional Dungeons & Dragons world is not especially high. Your characters, the heroes, are hopefully the exception, but the characters and the other NPCs in the world don't know they're the heroes. They think they're just a random person. And a goblin arrow is likely to kill any random human being in a Dungeons & Dragons world. Let's say that these goblins want to be extra sure that the guy with the hat bites it, so they send an extra arrow their way. 2 monks attack the wizard. But the goblins also, again, are not stupid. The goblins have every reason to assume that these humans are like the last humans that they killed. 4 versus 0 is better odds than 4 versus 1, so they send 2 arrows at Sister Asterix. As the monk is, again, also not wearing armor. So both of these players now get to avoid attacks or take a little bit of damage, and then we get to go on with them fighting the goblins, and they get to feel cool. But even then I have this niggling thing in the back of my head that says, is 4 goblins really the best that we can do? As a general, well, not rule, guideline, whenever I'm sending 4 of one type of thing, I'm looking at it and going, should I replace some of these with a different kind of monster? There are absolutely times that you want to send 10 zombies in because you want that horde kind of feeling. But it also trips a bell, an alarm in my head that says, do I really want to do that here? Or am I better off mixing it up, sending in a different kind of unit so it feels more natural that the bruiser kind of enemy marches forward and engages the melee while the artillery monsters back there try to get rid of the mage? Maybe we swap out a couple of these goblins for like a bugbear, maybe a warg. If it's the bugbear, they can engage the monk in melee damage so that the monk feels good about taking those heavier melee hits away from their wizard. And the wizard only has to get rid of a couple goblins before they can join the monk in getting rid of the bugbear. If it's the warg, maybe we have 3 goblins, and the monk can now feel safe rushing forward and engaging those goblins in melee combat. But oh no! Didn't see that warg that was stalking you from the forest, and now it's jumped on your mage and is turning it into a new chew toy. Now the mage has a reason to use spells like Shield and Misty Step to get away from the warg, and the monk has reasons to use their deflects to engage the goblins and use that extra movement to get back to the warg before the warg continues to nom-nom on the wizard. One of the things that makes TTRPGs not a video game is that there is an intelligent and flexible mind that controls the monsters, and an intelligent and flexible mind that to meet the players where they need them to. You don't have to change up the monsters and add a new bugbear, a new warg, or whatever. You can just change the current monsters. Take 2 of your goblins, give them a +1 to attack and damage. It is functionally the same as if you gave them a +2 strength. And then give them spears for higher damage. Have those 2 goblins be the melee goblins that march forward to meet the monk in melee combat with their spears and their punchy, while the 2 goblins in the back engage in range combat with the wizard who fizzled. Whenever I encounter a player who says that they prefer a game where the monster accepts the roles, that the dragon accepts being tanked, I think back to my many years playing MMOs, where there's this hyper-intelligent villain with these plots to take over the world that is apparently too stupid to realize that the only reason that they haven't killed the tank is the healer over there that has been spamming heals on them the entire time. And most of those players that I play MMOs with play Dungeons & Dragons first. They may not be your friends or at your table, but they exist in this hobby. And one day they may be at your table. And the reason they're not playing an MMO right now is because they want a different kind of experience than they got over there in the MMO. If they wanted that, they'd be playing that. Like so much in this hobby, what is right and wrong is really going to depend on the expectations at the table. There are going to be players that want a tactical challenge no matter the game, and they are not wrong for wanting that. It doesn't have to be Pathfinder or Draw Steel. It can be Dungeons & Dragons or Daggerheart. I play Pathfinder every couple weeks with a group, and they love Daggerheart. because the monsters were played in a way to combo their abilities together to provide a challenge to the players. They just want the worthy adversary. Whatever spells, abilities, talents, skills that you get in a game, they want to feel like it was worth using them in a tactical manner, to force the monster to have no choice but to go through the tank to get to the backline mage or artillery or whatever. And sometimes, yeah, they do just want to blast off a fireball and watch hordes of undead go up in flames. Or they do want to watch, tiny little goblin arrows bounce off their cool monk. Until they get to the boss fight, in which case they return to wanting an adversary that really puts them through their paces, makes it feel like it was worth investing in all these abilities. And then there's some players that really don't want that at all. Maybe this is how they blow off some steam at the end of a long week. They just want to see some monsters blow up. They don't really want to have to think tactically about it. They wanted to play a wizard that blew things up. I don't want to have to think about monster arrows. That's the monk's problem to deal with. Let them deal with that. Or maybe they're super into the narrative and they really only tolerate the combat because it raises the stakes of the narrative. Whatever the reason is, if you try to force that player into a tactical situation, they're going to begrudge you doing so. And they're not wrong for that either. Either one of these players, if you mismatch them with the kind of game that you're offering, they're going to get frustrated, and reasonably so. That's not why they're here playing that game. And the only reason we become wrong is when we're trying to tell a group of players that they are having fun the wrong way. And I realize that this means that I am functionally telling people who are having fun, telling other people that they're wrong, that they're having fun the wrong way. And that is kind of hypocritical, but I guess hypocrisy is the end of all things. So what you going to do? Yeah, the goblins are probably aware that the person wearing the funny hat and the bathrobes is able to cast Fireball. They have casters of their own. They know what that looks like. But they shouldn't always have perfect tactics either. Humans certainly don't. If you've ever played a game like Overwatch, where Reinhardt pushes forward with the giant shield and the giant hammer, watch everybody just focus on the Reinhardt, completely ignoring the Widowmaker that just deleted the healer. It is the same thing. People see the big giant person with the giant hammer and the giant shield, and they get intimidated by them, and they just need to attack that thing, disregarding greater threats. The same thing here. Your monsters should behave realistically. Sometimes that means that it is tactically, sometimes it absolutely does not. Your dragon should probably not care about the fighter waving around a toothpick in their face. They are intelligent enough and strong enough, healthy enough, to realize that the greater threat is the healer or the mage in the background. And if I just get rid of them, I can take my time with this fighter. And tank takes damage, healer heals damage, tank takes more damage, healer heals more damage. Only really leaves the question of, can the DPS reduce the hit points of the monster to 0 before the healer runs out of heals, as the only kind of dramatic question. And I like spreadsheets as much as the next person, but that's not really engaging, is it? Certainly not after 5 to 20 levels of it. I don't know about you, but that's not why I play this game. But this advice doesn't exist because we did things one time. We didn't throw one construct against the rogues and all of a sudden all the party rebelled. We didn't avoid the monk one time and all of a sudden everything was spoiled. It became a habit. At the levels of attack and defense that were available in previous editions, things got so bad that we could no longer challenge the players head on and succeed. We couldn't make the players feel like their characters were in danger. And adventurers should feel like they were in danger. So some of us punted. We never shot the monks. We always put in constructs. We gave spell resistance to a bunch of monsters so that the mages, the warlocks, the clerics couldn't possibly do any spell damage to just delete monsters. And that's not fun either. So yeah, you should shoot your monks. And you should shoot your mages. You should shoot anything that feels appropriate at the moment. And you should naturally react when somebody punches you in the face, because that's what people do. Your job as a dungeon master, when it comes to running monsters in combat, is to run the monsters in what seems to be a realistic manner. And sometimes that is tactically, and sometimes they're going to react rashly, because that's what they should do. And you want to meet the players where they are to keep them from being bored or keep them from being overwhelmed. And that includes yourself. If you're not having fun at this table either, then you may need to change up how you're running combat. And you may need to tell the players that so they know what to expect. You are a player too. try to have some fun.
Were put to a use my parents or Avonthi never would have guessed. I learned to run from anyone with an unnaturally white smile. Denner resin slowly bleaches your teeth. So if a sweet eater lives long enough for their teeth to grow fully white,